Hello, welcome back to the desk corner. Welcome back to a new video. And this video is a continuation of a portrait drawing I started a little while ago, and I've already created one video about this so far. So I'm going to link that one in case you haven't seen it. But my plan is to create different video parts until I finish this drawing and just walk you through my process of what I'm doing as I'm creating a graphite and charcoal portrait drawing. So if that's something that interests you, then just keep on watching today's video. This is about where I left off in my last video, and if you want to see that one to see what materials and stuff I'm using, so I'm not repeating myself in this video, again, I'm going to have that one linked, but there's no real reason why I'm using these giant Faber Castell pencils a lot. It's just because I recently bought them and they're just like the other Faber Castell 9000 graphite pencils, they're just bigger. So if you see giant pencils and you're confused, that's why they are there, just for your information. So as I'm moving on, and in this video I'm kind of going to finish up the neck area, the ear, and the forehead, and also add a lot of detail to the lips and the eyes and shadows and things like that. I really want to make it clear that when you're working with graphite and charcoal, you're really trying to emphasize highlights and midtones and shadows, because since there are no colors, you don't have to worry about that. You pretty much just have to worry about value. And this is something that is actually a good thing, because I think especially if you're a beginner too and you want to learn about value and creating contrast, it's easier to do so if you're doing something grayscale or black and white like this versus a color piece, in my opinion. So when I'm working on a piece like this, I really pay attention to shadows and highlights, and I don't just mean the darkest shadows, like as you can see on the neck, where I'm using obviously a charcoal pencil to create those really dark shadows or really bright highlights. I'm not just talking about that, but I'm also talking about the kind of gradation and how it gradually goes from lighter to darker in certain areas. So you could see above that really dark shadow in the neck, there are some lighter shadows in the chin. And of course there are some darker ones, and then there's some highlights as well. But there's kind of a gradual look to that, and you could see where you get to a mid-tone and then a highlight. It's not anything that looks super harsh. It's kind of just a nice gradation, which is why it's good to practice creating gradient scales and just practicing how you can get from shadow to highlight in a natural looking way. I sometimes get questions about how to make your drawing look more realistic, what to do if it looks flat and not 3D. And the thing about this is, of course, I haven't seen these individual drawings, so I can't really provide a true specific critique of anything like that. What I will say though is sometimes what happens is you don't get enough contrast in your drawing, and if you're using something to blend out like a tissue or a Q-tip with graphite or charcoal, that spreads around the graphite and charcoal and picks it up sometimes, and it can lighten up your shadows, and sometimes the powder will go into your highlighted areas, and you end up kind of just with a lot of midtones if you don't go in and fix that with an eraser and darken up your shadows again. And sometimes blending can be hard in that sense, because you go and blend it out to get a smooth result, and then you kind of lose a little bit of that contrast and you need to build it back up again. That's why I encourage you to use a thicker paper, so that you can continue, I guess a paper with a lot of tooth, I should say, so that you can continue to build up those layers. If you're going to continue blending and building up and blending and building up, the paper can still take more layers. So if you feel like your drawing is falling flat and you're blending, that could be why. It could also just be that you didn't add in those dark shadows to begin with, or those lighter highlights, which you need to leave as well. I tried to make my gradual transition between highlight and shadow look a little bit subtle here, so you can see that from the highlights going into the mid-tone and the shadow. On the cheeks there's a lot of highlights, above the lip, even on the lips and the chin. I want to make sure that those look subtle and naturally move into the mid-tone areas versus just a bright white highlight that then suddenly becomes a shadow. Wouldn't look quite as realistic. So you can see that there. And also you'll notice I'm not doing a lot of blending with tissues or Q-tips, because for this drawing I wanted to preserve kind of that skin texture that you get with the paper I'm using, which is a mixed media paper. I just wanted it to have a little bit of texture, and I don't want to blend out, because if I do blend out I have to go in and fix it for highlights and shadows like I explained before. I also thought this would be a good opportunity to talk about how I did the glasses, or at least the eye area under the glasses for now, since there's a lot of shadows cast by the glasses. And I think when you have areas where there's a lot of weird shadows cast, you just have to pay attention to the weird shapes that you get, like squiggly lines, some lines being thicker than others, and some spots being darker than others, and just copy what you see and it comes together, even if the shapes seem weird while you're starting to add them in. Just trust the reference photo. I also need to apologize for all the skipping around that I seem to be doing here. When I get to this stage in a portrait, I'm kind of just like going back and forth and fixing different things at different times, and I'm not really working on one specific area and completely finishing it. So I kind of just go back and forth like a crazy person a lot in this, start working on the lips and then go back to the eyeshadows and whatever, but I promise it'll all come together. And I thought it would be good to mention that I'm using a Q-tip on this particular area of the drawing because the texture was a little too much, and I decided to smooth it out a little bit with my Q-tip, but I'm not going to be using the Q-tip a whole lot in this drawing. As you can see, I haven't really used it that much the entire time, but I was using it to flatten out a texture a little bit. And when you use a Q-tip, you want to be careful with it and make sure you're not like scrubbing with it or anything like that. Just be gentle with it, and they tend to pick up a lot of graphite and charcoal too, so you might end up getting lighter layers because of it. Just keep that in mind. Something like a blending stump will pick up less of the graphite, I believe, or charcoal, but then with those you don't always get a smooth result. Sometimes you get streaks, so it really just is up to you and what you like to use to blend. You'll see me going back to the lips a lot, and with lips, I'm kind of slow to finish an area because I just am nervous about them. I've not always been the best at drawing lips and mouths, and I just sometimes accidentally make something look cartoony, so I'm very careful around that area to slowly build things up and not go in too intensely at once. And I want it to be nice and subtle. I still need to work on the teeth as well. The teeth don't look so good at this point, but let's just ignore that. I'm going to start working on the forehead now, and I'm still working on a couple shadows left by the glasses. I still actually need to fill in the glasses too, by the way, so that's another thing that wasn't quite as difficult as creating all those shadows. It was actually easier in comparison to all the weird shadows that I thought didn't look good until I finished them and I realized it looked fine when it came together all at the end there. The forehead is kind of just a broad area, so I'm starting off right above the glasses and creating whatever details might be there, like the eyebrows, the shadows, some wrinkles and things like that. The area I'm working on right now is actually a little confusing for me because there were a lot of weird shadows, partly from the glasses and partly from the eyebrows that I couldn't really see too well because there wasn't a lot of detail in the photo of the eyebrows. Sometimes you just get areas that aren't super easy to tell and distinguish things from each other, and you just add in what you see and hope that it'll come out okay in the end, and that's what I did for this one. And then I established where some of those wrinkles in the forehead were right away so that I would know where they are, but when I do that, I'm not creating any kind of harsh line to show where a wrinkle is. I'm just kind of creating a subtle shadow there that goes in the right shape and direction. And you don't want to create any sharp lines, of course, because there just aren't really sharp lines in things like skin, so keep that in mind. Don't accidentally press too hard, use too much pressure for things like that, because you can always build up, but you can't really take away. Well, you can, but it's a little bit harder to take away, and especially if you've imprinted the paper with a harsh line, it's going to be hard to erase that if you need to. Okay, so now I'm just establishing shadows and slowly building up. I almost said building up to the highlights, but going from the shadow to the highlighted area by creating a gradient. And I kind of like to start out more subtle with this and then just build it up as I go, and that's what I'm doing here, but it's not going to be all too difficult of an area to work on because it is kind of just a flat area. I wouldn't say flat, I guess, but it's a broad area, and I think that I actually still need to go in and work a little bit more on this because I had too many linear strokes at the top that you can see, and I need to go in and fix that by maybe doing some strokes in the opposite direction or something. And I don't think I actually fixed that for this video, but that's just something to keep in mind there, is if you color in one direction, if you shade in one direction, sometimes you'll get linear looking strokes that you can fix by creating some in the opposite direction and kind of getting rid of those line marks, or getting rid of any direction or particular direction that the lines are going in, which helps a lot. And I do that a little bit, but I don't think I did it enough, so I'm gonna have to go back and make sure that I do that. So I wouldn't say that the forehead is fully finished at this point in the portrait, but you can at least see how I'm working on it and what my thought process is as I'm working on it. There were a few eyebrow details that I went in and rendered after I shaded part of the forehead, and then there's even more details to be done with the glasses, of course, because it just never seems to end in that area, and that's pretty much what I'm going to work on for the remainder of this video. And I think that for the next video, I'm going to try to do either the hair and the clothing in one video, or maybe 2 separate videos, but there's not a whole lot of clothing to be done, so maybe it'll just all fit into one video. So I'm now working on the ear, which was very oddly shaped in this reference photo, and I don't think I got the shape completely right at first, and so I kind of had to go in and fix it a little bit, which sometimes happens if you don't get your shape right at first. So you have to go in and fix it, which is a lot harder to do once you start shading and realize that it's off a little bit. And that's what happened with the inner part of the ear here, was it was just off a little bit. And you could tell that it looked a little weird, so I had to keep working on it. You'll see me working on this a lot, going in and erasing and fixing things. Sometimes I have issues working on the inner parts of ears because there's so many shapes involved, and sometimes you just miss something, or you forget where your reference sketch was, and then you don't really know where to put the shadows. And so be careful with ears because they can be a little bit tricky. And in this portrait, at least I only have to draw one ear, because I don't know what I would have done if I had to draw both, because this was not really easy for me to do. This ear just was a little odd in the reference photo at the angle that the picture was taken from, and the lighting and all that. Sometimes angles and lighting will make things look a lot more odd than you would expect them to look, and that's what happened to me with this. You could see me going in also with my Q-tip and blending out a little bit there too. And so I guess I did use my Q-tip a little bit more. Oh, here's the part I wanted to mention to you guys. The glasses was super easy because all I had to do was kind of go in and create some really dark areas and leave some white areas for highlights for these particular glasses that had a really thin rim around them, and I didn't have to worry too much about details on the glasses and things like that, thank goodness. I didn't completely finish the glasses during this video, and I still have to work on them a little bit, but for the most part, I pretty much finished. And I'm happy about that because I was so intimidated by it. I was so afraid I was going to get something wrong with all the different shapes going on underneath with the shadows, and then also just filling in the glasses. I didn't want to warp the circles that I had created, and I'm not very good at circles, and some of you guys might already know that. If you've seen some of my previous videos, I do talk a lot about my fear of circles and ovals. And so we aren't quite done here with some of these areas, and I might go back and talk about them more, like the final details, in my next video about this drawing. And hopefully there will just be one more, but there might be 2 depending on how long it takes me. These drawings just take me a while. That's just the nature of them, and I haven't done a portrait in a while because they just take me so long. But now I really want to do portraits again, so we're just going to see how this goes. Thank you guys as always so much for watching today's video. I hope that you enjoyed it. Leave a comment down below and let me know what you thought about it. And I'll see you in the next one, and there will be more of these to come. So don't know if it'll be the next one, but there will be more to come. Anyway, thanks again so much for watching. Bye guys.